As the old saying goes, if it seems too good to be true, it probably is. That's often the case. However, every now and again it's not. Recently it was not. This is a 2.4 GHz digital digitan spread spectrum telephone by Uniden. The model number is EXR2460. This is probably a mid to late 90s model. This particular auction was sent to me, I believe, by Nick, and it was retailing for on the eRipOff for a whopping $2 with $10.80 to ship it. And here's the evidence that it did in fact sell for that amount for a grand total of only $13.61. Now, I stopped looking for telephones on the eRipOff a couple years ago because the prices just started to go astronomical for any of the stuff that I find interesting like this. And now that I have other bills I need to pay and so forth, I can't even rationalize spending $40 or $50 on a cordless phone that I don't need. So I haven't looked for telephones on there in probably a good 2+ years now. So this is the first one I bought from there in a while. I was very leery of this auction because in the past I've personally experienced a lot of cases where a seller will list the item as an auction, start it at a very low price, and then when the bids just don't go up, they simply cancel the transaction at the end of the auction. And that's how we get that mysterious, the item is no longer available and the transaction was refunded situation. Which I can't even, I don't understand why eBay even allows that. That should not be allowed. There should be a huge red flag to their system when that happens multiple times. But regardless, I thought that would be the case here, but nope, everything was copacetic. There were no other bids. I got it for $2 and it actually showed up quick too. It was here within 2 or 3 days. So this is very reminiscent of the EXS2660, which is in my opinion one of the best cordless phones ever made. I did find a similar model to this a number of years ago when I was still at the old location, and I just never got around to it, which I'm kind of disappointed about now because I've been intrigued by this particular unit for a while because it's very similar to the 900 megahertz model in terms of form factor. So the question is, does the 2.4 gigahertz frequency perform differently? And I would imagine that it would get less coverage because in theory a higher frequency should have less coverage because it doesn't pass through objects as well. This is kind of a interesting use case to test that in because it seems like the form factor is pretty much the same. I just opened the battery compartment here and it looks like we might have some problems. It does look like there is some corrosion as well as evidence of like some liquid leaking in there, so this might require some repair or it might be corroded beyond all usability. I don't know, depends on how long it's sat. The antenna is hooked a bit but it's not broken. Could potentially try to fix it out. It seems like it might be flexible enough to salvage still. It's interesting, when I've moved here now, I don't really pay as much attention to the range of the phones because I just don't need it anymore. You know, at the old location, I was always very particular about the range because I wanted to work good outside, you know, by the water. And it was always baffling to me how there were so many models that had such abysmal range, but yet people seemed to like them anyways. And now that I've used the phones in this use case here, now I understand it, because it's very rare that I take the phone more than 50 or 100 feet from the base. And even like the VTech 5831, which from what I can think of is probably one of the weakest ranged phones that I use on a regular basis, even that thing will cover the majority of the yard just fine. So now I understand why to most people a 100, 200 foot range is no big deal, because that's the typical use case about as far as you go. So I would have liked to have tested this at the old house in tandem with the 900 megahertz model, because I really had a good idea of what the coverage was like on the phones over there. Of course, I could still just walk down the street here with the phone and get an idea of how it works, but I won't have the use for such a long range. So anyways, that's it. Just an interesting story about how it seemed to be too good to be true, but it was. Unusual, especially for the eRipOff, but a nice pleasant change in the trend of the cost of the items on there.